what's it? Got caught away listening to a bit of techno, and I was listening to some Bob Marley earlier, having a good old single. Techno, and I was listening to some Bob
I've left
Marley
the
earlier,
thing
having a
fucking
good
running.
old single. Echoes again. I did this twice in a row now. You know, last stream, this stream, every stream. Hey. It's not about mopping this time, I promise. No, it's about the CPGB-ML. I'm gonna cover a video that I was considering just re-uploading because it's unlisted now, but I imagine I'll end up in a bad situation like I did when I re-uploaded Empanada content. So we'll avoid the YouTubing strikings and all that, and I'll just add discussion points to it and go through it a bit more because I mean, there's a lot to sort of package in when you're looking at the fucked nature of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. We'll see how far that fucking throws down the hill when you see the way in which they look at science and the way they look at philosophy. Because praxis is the best way to look at how someone behaves. Their praxis, how they interact with society, and what is their analysis of the world, if they are even making one. Which, spoiler, they're not. Alright, so CPGB-ML and Infantile recorder. I know what I'm doing. I promise. We'll put Mal up there. Mal can just chill and watch. He's not harming. He's not harming no one.
What does
I did not give you permission to begin. Not you like that. Not me like that. Like that. I'll leave the timestamp visible. Get as closest to it as we can, though. Oh, wait, actually, no, that'll cut off double digits, won't it? So we gotta think about the double digits. A bit more. Bit better of a view, eh?
What does failure?
It's so loud. My TV's too loud. I'm using an old TV. I don't have the fucking remote anymore.
Man Carl Benjamin and the Communist Party of Great Britain Marxist-Leninist have in common? We'll find out later. Not to be confused with the popular punk haunt of a similar name, CPGB-ML is Britain's #1 communist party. Or so they say. Now, a little bit of backstory. CPGB-ML, or CPGB for syllable's sake, or CP, whatever you want to call them, began in 2004 as a split from the Socialist Labour Party ran at the time by Arthur Scargill. CPGB in its current form then represent the Marxist-Leninist faction of the SLP, who found their party's support for the imperialist Labour Party to be completely untenable. Moving towards the events of last year, the new ML group Red Fightback posted an
Mind you, they were in the organisation up until, there was the big blasting by other communists of, like, anyone who's working with the imperialist Labour Party, because I think it was around 2003, 2004, when, it might have been later, but I'm pretty sure it was around that time when Labour, Party Fit for Imperialism was wrote. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that was around the same time.
Article detailing their stance on LGBT oppression in Britain. A few months later, CPGB linked this article on their Twitter page, chastising them as fighting against reality itself.
Look at just the plain old man shit going on here. Under the influence of liberal academia. These people are liberal academics. Where did they get their academia from? Go on, like what? The anti-liberal universities. These are people who are going to go and preach the Nazi conspiracy of the universities being full of communists now, so they can push their shit. Like, oh man.
This happened around the same time that many LGBT members within the party, like Lewis Hodder, became increasingly unnerved by CPGB's strange attitude in regards to LGBT issues. One attitude Hodder makes of note is the use of casual homophobia within the Central Committee.
More than just that, I mean, someone I used to engage with a CPGB-ML, he called me an F-bomb. Not just, he didn't just call me a homosexual, he didn't just call me gay, he called me an F-bomb for being really defensive over trans issues in a discussion. Like, just for me defending, not just trans issues, but gay issues too, because they were turning around and, like, saying homophobia is fine because people, Marxists of the past were. And it got into a whole entanglement discussion, and next thing you know, I'm being called an F-bomb because I'm standing up for this shit while this guy's doing that whole common sense bollocks and throwing around casual homophobia and transphobia passively. And with the trans stuff, a lot of them are not just anti-trans in the sense of they don't like the people. There are a lot of people in this org. You don't get this from the leadership so much. There's people in these orgs who turn around and espouse that these people should be fucking killed. So that's the world we're dealing with. And I could go on scoop tweets up if I really fucking need to prove that. Like, I don't need to fucking sit here and say it. I can go around fucking scooping up tweets if I really fucking have to.
Including belittling of them, stating, "Oh, you're young. You'll realize when you get older that you'll want to have kids." So not just casual homophobia there, but complete dinosaur perspective, thinking that being queer separates you from the want to have children. Hodder later released an article of his experiences and analysis of the party last April in EP magazine. It's a good website, by the way, you should definitely give it a look. Now, all of the contradictions came together last September when CPGB had their 8th Congress, in which the Central Committee unanimously passed Motion 8, which details a complete rejection of identity politics in all forms, with those thought of promoting it liable to expulsion.
Okay, but nationalism is an identity issue. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So does this mean the CPGB-ML is against the right to national struggle of the Cymric, Cornish, Scottish, and Irish peoples? If all of it is not allowed, all of it, not a single bit. Because even if we were to, for some disgusting reason, take some consideration that they are somehow correct in their transphobic bullshit, which they're not, why would you then make it about all forms of, just use the scary word, identity politics? I mean, what people use the ID poll in a sluric fashion, what I call that bad ID, I call that identitarianism, because that's what it used to be called. Fascists were known as well, not ideologically, but tendency-wise. The tendencies of fascism has been marked as identitarian in the past. It's not a new term. And these identitarians, they get called the ID poll, or the SJW crowd. That's probably a one that's less inaccurate in its qualm. But they're not really social justice warriors. They're not really fighting for social justice properly. They're not really fighting for class justice. They're espousing crap and pushing for third wave politics. But it's identitarianism. That's what that is. Identity politics just means polemics that in regard an identity issue. You can't just turn around and say all of that. That's disgusting. And liable to expulsion. They'll just kick you out. This is a party that takes up a lot of people's money, but doesn't do much with that money to give anything back to the people.
Really getting down with the time there, guys.
Nothing.
CPGB has a tendency of being a mountain of sorts. By that, I don't mean a purveyor of knowledge, but more so that they uphold a line that's never really criticized or falters. Props for integrity. Pity he had to draw this into a dogma. Unfortunately, CPGB-ML only represents a mere example of a much wider issue of dismissing identity politics as inherently liberal or bourgeois. Being me, I'm no mass authority on this subject, so the following is not a work of me alone, but rather a paraphrasing of a much bigger set of works by a team of queer communists that have amassed some incredible insight that I certainly wouldn't have been able to bring to town on my own.
They don't know that they know their struggle better than anyone. That's how it is, brother. They know their struggle better than anyone. We can't come around and tell them what is, what isn't.
Incredible insight that I certainly wouldn't have been able to bring to town on my own. They are the all-communist trans-Soviet. Their name, not mine. They've done an incredible amount of work, and the full articles, including the bibliography, are in the description. Hope you enjoy.
Oh, I forgot to put the link to the video in the description. That's my bad. I'll have to do that in the editor.
Now, as I mentioned before, the whole crescendo began publicly with CPGB-ML sharing the Red Fight Back article, and claims that they are showcasing that gender doesn't exist, and making it out that they believe in a grand medical conspiracy. And this is, of course, not the point of the RFP article, but it does...
What this? Rather, gender, they claim, is some kind of medical conspiracy where at birth the doctors go away and huddle together. What the fuck? Can someone find me anyone trans who's ever said this? Because I have never in my life heard a trans person push something like this fucking crazy. Never. Like, they're making this up. They huddled together and decided it. No, it's that society has taken the slight differentiations and the wide differentiations that occur between us based on biological inference and have used that to create over thousands and thousands, not millions, no, not millions, we've not been around that long, sorry, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fucking years of development that has pushed into normalizing specific roles in society to these gender groups. Like, they're completely getting it wrong on purpose. This is obvious bullshit, and they know it's bullshit. They're trying to spin it into conspiratorial crap. This is conscious. They know what they're doing. No one is pushing this shit. You couldn't find anyone pushing this shit unless it's some stupid hokey liberal, not Red Fight Back. So, genuinely, nice for kissing fucking shit, CPGB-ML, you bunch of fucking ass lickers. Now, not to insult people who might be into that weird shit, but this statement here is absolutely backwards, because what they're doing is they're taking a situation that anyone who's talked about it has talked about the long-standing thousands and thousands of years that have gone into the structures of this, the gender role structures in society. And actually, this is not deteriorating away from class, because one of the first class interactions that anthropologists can find is the, you know, in a class warfare situation, not the initial splitting of, so the original developments of gender didn't come slightly before the solidification of class. It was the emergence of class. So you had you know, the matriarch and patriarch thing come from 2 out of 5 typical genders that you would get within, and it was 3 to 5, but around 5 different genders you get in a, you know, tribal communist society, you know, pre-development tribal socialism. So you had the chieftain, the hunter, the gatherer, you know, like person who would gather foliage and vegetation and would help with construction of like temporary living, because most people were nomad, or if they weren't nomad, structured living. You then had the you then had the mother. sometimes the mother and the gatherer would be surmounted in the same one, and you would have um sometimes maybe even a warrior, but sometimes the chieftain would be the warrior. Like, these things intersected, but they came from like class emergencies. That's where gender roles started to emerge. So when you look at the situation, and actually it's not so simple as people might think, as like, okay, well, the person who births is the mother. No, 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 no. Some tribes were different, all over the globe. Like, I'm not just speaking to any corner, I'm speaking all over the globe. Some tribes were mad different, where you know, matriarch was running the show, and the bloke was raising the kids, and everything's all flippity floppity. The hunter, the warrior, that wasn't always a bloke. A lot of the time, it was a woman. You know, so these things weren't solidified. It wasn't like, okay, man chieftain, woman this, that. No, it was more so like an agreement amongst these people as to who takes over this role and that role in society. Nothing was completely cemented. Everyone had their own different way at one point or another. Well, not entirely individual, but you know what I mean by that. Like, yeah, no one was governing each other. They were all nomadic cliques, no big than like 60 to a few hundred people, like if they were ever roaming together, but normally they'd be in smaller groups. Um, when you saw the crises that started to hit this era of society, it seems to be the only way we can justify it at the moment. The wars started between tribes, and then you got the enslavement of women. And that's where the real big solidification of gender roles comes from, was the beginning of class as the oppressive system we know it today. They enslaved women, and well, originally it wasn't the plan to enslave them. They thought after they were slaughtered the tribesmen of their tribe, that they would be able to just incorporate them in and change their culture. But then when that couldn't happen, and they failed to do so, they enslaved the women and forced them to drop their culture and adopt the culture of that tribe. Genocide is a long-standing issue of humanity. And so, with that process, you then got the beginning of class, but the beginning of class came from the beginning of gender issues and the contradictions that arose there. They came together. Um, what's it? And it's quite interesting that we didn't need racism for ages for us to be just as bigoted towards other groups. Like, racism as a foundating thing, the specific term racism, because racist was seen as like a positive thing to call yourself in the 1600s. I don't know if people know that. All the way up to the 1900s, there was in the late 1800s, there was the quote racist movement, end quote, which was to fight against the rising rights of black people. So you got to look, but before that point, in the, I guess it was the 14th or the 15th century, that racism started. I don't think the term caught on there, but that was when black race, white race started to catch on, and um, you know, eh, that expanded things massively further. But that discrimination was kind of always in this system, especially when Rome reached its capitalist development. A lot of people miss out the fact that this isn't our first rodeo with capitalism. Last time we blown ourselves back to the Stone Age, so people blame the Germans for that. No, that was the Romans' fault. All the Romans' fault. They raped, they pillaged, and they stole. Um, as one Roman historian would say. Exactly right. Gender and sexual based oppression specifically grew out of and is perpetuated by shit like property rights. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, women were seen as property for a long time. I mean, as this video will go on to state, it was one time when, and for a long time, where women weren't seen as separate from men. They were just seen as lesser, like, deviations of them, judged by what they don't have, which is ignorant, because really, to demoralize women, when actually it's scientifically been proven that men are actually a deviation of women, not the other way around. And also to be derogatory to literally what is the continuative person to bring life forward is in my opinion absolutely disgusting. Like, it makes no sense to me that we ever went down that logical path. Like, you're talking about you're talking about like the most important component to how we exist and persist as a people, and these people treat them like trash. And the problems of the LGBT struggle always end up spilling into feminism. That's why I really, really cannot stand TERFs. They don't understand the intersection between feminism and trans rights. They are fucking blind.
Let us ask the question, what is...
And that might not even be their fault, but if you're going to continue to be ignorant when it's brought up to you and then take a stand against it and become radically against trans people, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists. And be careful with the people to use the term radical feminist, because it normally means third wave feminists. And third wave feminists conveniently follow the third wave from Mr. Blair and Clinton. They're very... that weird neoliberal fascism that Blair pushed. I mean, Gaddon, the guy who came up with the third way, was not very fond of Blair's version of the third way. It's complicated shit. It's messy.
Sex and gender. Video number 329.
Oh no, the question that scares the CPGB-ML. Are you ready?
You can make the case that biology played a part in the modern division of labour among genders. What you can't say is that this is wholly a logical consequence of nature. It is not self-evident or common sense, a word these folks love to use, by the way, that the division of labour between men and women, and indeed even the mere existence of those two categories, is natural. Even if it were, this is undialectical. Nothing is just so. It is all a product of what comes before and gives rise to what comes after. Basic stuff, right? It's been spoken about a lot on LeftTube by now, but I'll do it again.
No, but this is one of the things that does really piss me off with these people. The people that we're dealing with, these fucking, they're essentially fucking right-wingers that use Marxism with the way they behave. Brutish mentality. And what they do, because they're very intelligent people, is they use dialectical rationalism, which is antithetical to dialectical materialism. And dialectical rationalism is basically functions on Hegel's theory of opposites, where they just balance everything out through the means of opposites, and that's how they push their position. You should always be careful of anyone using dialectical rationalism. It is opposed to the core principle of Marxism, and there is no middle ground on principle. Dialectical materialism is universal. You either use a universal or you're not being a dialectical materialist. That's period. Hell, I have a lot of engagements with religious folk and have a lot of mystical conversations because of that. And I still come at the conversations that we'll have from a dialectical materialist standpoint, but still speaking about mystical issues, which is, I must explain to people, not a materialist issue in its entirety. A lot of the time it's tied to something material, but it's not a material issue entirely. It's, what would be the word? I can't remember the word for stuff that's not material. I'll just say pseudo material. That works, but it's spiritual discussion. It's talking more about like, what's the meaning of this? What's the meaning of that? How does this intersect with this? What's the confines of that? And I will come at it from a very more like materialist angle. But one thing that I get on well with these folk with is I know how to still talk to the issues that are being brought up from that mystical angle. But dialectics, so I got a little trained off, but so dialectics, this pisses me off. Dialectical materialism is simple as far as I'm concerned. I don't know whether it's my autism that makes it feel simple for me, because the over left side brain and the way it forces you to break components down, it does make you a bit used to thinking like a dialectician, because you can't help it. You fucking that's the way the autism retardifies you. You just start breaking everything down to its finest components and analyzing how everything works because you want to know. You just want to know. Well, it's not even about wanting to know. It's like a distractive thing. Like you see something and you're just like, okay, how the fuck does that work? What's going on there? What's going on here? Like you're like dogs, so they just get distracted with everything that's going past them. It's like that. Dialectical materialism is the essential starting point of Marxist thought. Well, yeah, it's the core lens to it. Like you can't understand anything else if you don't know the dialectical materialism because everything is done for that analysis. And if you're just reading books and you're not using dialectical materialism to analyze reality, you're being a dogmatist at that point. It doesn't even matter if the books are correct. It's blind. And I've had them turn around to me and say like, telling me to avoid Panther's writings, avoid Fanon's writings, avoid Gonzalo's writings, avoid um fuck, I forgot his name, man. The cool ass fucking Filipino revolutionary guy and all them like just anyone who isn't literally Marx to Mao and only half of Mao's work. He's very titchy with Mao. Um, uh, and that's what I got from him. And it's like, what? You can't be serious. A, we learn from our mistakes anyway, and B, if everyone else failed, if the BPP failed, everyone else failed, didn't the Soviet Union fail? Where's the Soviet Union today? Is the PRC a success because it's now an imperialist power? Like, do we now pat ourselves on the back that someone touting our name, communism, is a fascist empire that uses its labor force in an abusive fashion? Like, there's so many good fucking people in China being rammed out and work in the hardest of work, and so many of them are communists, like real communists. They don't like what's going on. Whether they're Maoist, whether they're ML, there's fucking loads of them. It's trying to get contact with me Chinese brothers and sisters and getting them on. I bumped into someone in a game. I'm hoping maybe I can get good contact with them, pull them on stream at some point, have a conversation. Because getting a perspective from people in there, even if they're of the opposite side, so it comes to more of a discussion of opposites. We come from two different positions. I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna say, but getting a position from those communists would be nice, though. Getting in contact with some of the Maoists in China that have been struggling against revisionism for fucking donkeys. But what it comes to is that these people, they're using equation of opposites. They're doing Hegelianism. So when you're dealing with these red brown Marxists, and imagine being the piles Marxists, like fuck. Make your fucking piles. You get red blood in your shit, so it's red and brown. Ta-da. Feel sorry for anyone who might be eating their food while they're in, quote unquote, enjoying this. I'm not the most enjoyable of people.
Traditional descriptors of gender are reductionist. We can say all we want, XX and XY determine your gender, but we all know that there are far more chromosomes than simply these two. If we were to determine by ability to get pregnant, or bleed, or what kind of genitals you have, then this is also too slim, because again, many cis women can't get pregnant or menstruate, and many people are born intersex. Now, whatever it is, no matter what definitions you come up with, you'll always find plenty of examples in which such a definition is inconclusive. It is from this uncertainty that non-conforming folks have to defend their positions. If gender were indeed so clear, it would not in any way be necessary to have this such wide discussion.
There's only one bone in the body that's like, I'll say biological sex specific, because I like to detach the two and look at them from the wider perspective that trans people have been laying down. But like, is the pelvis. That's it. That's all that's different in the bone structure is just the pelvis.
Worth bearing in mind, by the way, that the modern definitions of sex aren't historically unchallenged. We today purport a two-sex model, but as recently as 300 years ago, there was a one-sex model. This asserted that women were not a unique sex.
And in the emergence of gender, most tribal societies had 3 to 5 genders, not 2.
But rather they were a deviation of men, defined by their lack of instead of their differences to. Only when the two-sex model appeared did science regard men and women in biological categories. Now, it's very strange that CPGB would not even question whether ruling class hegemony would ultimately reward purveyors of popular opinion, whilst demonizing unpopular narratives. They are, of course, communists. To uphold common sense, that's very un-Marxian. What too is highly non-Marxian, or just plain dogmatic, is to ignore modern insight in favour of old-fashioned perspectives that have now gone out of date. Anthropology has rendered ideas like Adam Smith's barter-to-money theory obsolete, and so too has anthropology made outdated much of what Engels spoke about in regards to the man being the inhibitor of productive labour. It was only towards the introduction of enclosure and privatization of property, and thereby into capital, that the dynamics began to radically change. Peasants, being in a different class interest to their feudal overlords, were resistant to these changes. What this resulted in was the ruling class dividing and conquering. A division was made between productive and reproductive labour, better said than me elsewhere. As of such, the only labour that was valued was productive labour, seeing as babies and housework creates no surplus for the economy. Of course, a concession
to a degree. So they actually pushed people into positions where they would have as many kids as possible, and because working your kids, for a lot of people who are in extreme poverty, you look up the state of early industrial Britain and early industrial America, the state of poverty had it to the point where parents are having to work their kids at the age of 6 in factories. That's the reason why my disability exists. Because of the 1800s overwork in factories. It was discovered through the trauma that kids were going through in these factories. You know, people, they eventually, I think it was, I can't remember whether it was late 1800s, like 1890s, or it was the early 1900s, but they put in a law that then moved up the age of working in factories to 13 or 14. Which, as you could imagine, is still too fucking low. I don't think it moved up to 18, 19 until after World War II. I'm not sure. It might have been just before. It might have been in the 30s. Why oppose hegemony when you can just submit yourself to it, LMAO? That's the petit bourgeois conclusion to most situations regarding revolution, isn't it?
Is made only because reproduction is necessary towards humanity's survival. It is for this reason then that sexism under capitalism is inherent. It's not just a kindler, and it's upheld by the hegemony of the land, with this reproductive labour being used as maintenance for the productive labour of men. Women's work is thereby considered common sense. So, as we can already see, systemic gendering was an essential part of capitalism's primitive accumulation. And so where does the LGBT come into all this? Well, LGBT defy the gender roles not just in self-identification, but in material reality.
Yeah.
In a gay relationship, if, according to capitalist whims, it necessitates that one of them defy the role of breadwinner or homemaker. In trans people, rejecting the role too, but specifically assigned to them at birth. It is creating a new synthesis of sorts, striking a direct blow to the ways in which we perceive gender roles in labour. This is of course parodied in the whole, the heteronormative capitalist patriarchy, blah blah, but
that's
I think if we look into this a bit deeper, we can see that there is a real...
That is an important point to note though. It does come into that. It is the problem of the heteronormative capitalist patriarchy. It's changed its image to a degree to make itself look more acceptable. But it's not changed. Anyone in the lower class knows that. And that's the thing. they're projecting when they say, "Oh yeah, uh these communists that are standing for LGBT issues are buying into liberal propaganda." They're buying into liberal propaganda by them believing that women's issues and LGBT issues have been dealt with. That is the what's it liberal propaganda that they have swallowed. They have swallowed capitalist realism like a fucking greased up turkey. Like they're going straight for it. Uh, they're completely consumed in capitalist realism. And I believe they dismissed the work on capitalist realism, which is hilariously either self-aware or ridiculous, because it shows how much they just shield themselves from actually understanding anything really Marxist. They're all about being in their bubble of what was, not what is. Now, if what was still is, it needs to be proven that it still is. You can't just read it and go, yeah, it still is. No, you got to go, okay, well, how does that compare to modern reality? What are the confines that relate to this? What is going on? What is the analysis of the real motherfucking world? Not glancing dismissals. I mean, like they made an analysis where they're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, we see that Lumpen could be radical, but no, they're all vagabonds and drug addicts. That's basically what they turned around and said. They're uncontrollable. There's no point engaging with them. And they turned around and spun the whole thing around and was just dismissed ever engaging with them. It's like, what the fuck is this? What? Proper white people shit.
Real, genuine meaning behind that expression. Ask yourself, why does LGBT plus exist as a collective group anyway? It's because these groups present collective threat to the orthodox system that prevents consciousness. And as we can see then, women's oppression and the LGBT oppression are highly connected. It's only when this analysis within capitalism is omitted that they appear separate. So, with all this being said, what then?
Good day at work, comrade. I'll catch you later. It's been a long time. Well, I would say a long time. It's been like a week or so since we've had a chat. I'll catch you in a bit, comrade. Respect. Yeah. You have a great day too.
Of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. Point number 1. CPGB-ML are vulgar materialists. To quote Lewis Hodder, members of the party have praised realism, assuming that reference to what is real, i.e. material, fulfills the function of dialectical materialism.
Realism is not the same as materialism. Like, this is a problem. This was a conundrum that happened in Marx's time. This is not a new contradiction. This is the injection of Hegelianism and Marxism. Dialectical materialism is not a Hegelian ideology. Anyone who tells you that are full of shit, and you should be careful of what they're preaching, yeah, even if they are innocent in the matter, because they're preaching dangerous shit. Dialectical materialism is opposed to Hegelianism. It is not the same thing. Yes, it is using dialectics, but as has been very distinctly described, dialectics is being used in a completely different philosophical function to how Hegelianism uses dialectics. They are not even equatable by a single margin, other than the one fact that they use dialectics. That's it. But to look at it as if it's just dialectics is reductionist beyond belief. Like concerningly reductionist. Like that's like I said, there's no middle ground on principle. When you start dissolving principle and mixing and mashing it around how you feel, realism is ideological, not based on material reality. It's based on what is realistic to you, based on a rationalized formulation of reality. Now, if you don't have experience in a lot of different sectors of society, your rationalizations are going to be contradictory to material reality, even if you get some things right, because you're disconnected. It's all fucking, you know, it all mashes out when you see this behavior. Like the I guess like Hodder himself puts it quite well here with assuming that reference to what is I real is i.e. material fulfills the function of dialectical materialism itself. Dialectical materialism is a universal formulation of analysis of the universe, and it's so. The thing is that this quote runs a bit too short, in my opinion. I know there's more to come, but the point that really needs to be laid with them is not so much about just their vulgar materialism on this level. They have a position where they seem to look at things from an absolution. They think absolute knowledge of the everything is a very simple thing for them to just grasp, and that they can just grab a hold of the absolute understanding of revolution and where to go. That type of absolutive nature is typical to vulgar materialism. This is not uncommon, but it's not talked about enough. And so, what these people come about at is that they come about at this position from like it's not just intellectualism of old, like from Roosevelt. This is some like neo-intellectualism. Sure, they're taking shit to the next level, but it's that same concept, that intellectual superiority complex that's built into the intelligentsia of bourgeois society. That is what drives the thinking force of parties like this. They claim to be parties of the people. They sift loads of money from their membership, and they do nothing for no one. Like, you're getting all this money, and they do nothing for no one. They're a scam. At best.
Self. Yet, this does not come up against anything that actually.
And not in the scamming just saying that they got no political aspirations. Oh, I guarantee you they've got political aspirations. They're making money out of the process while they're doing it. Like, they're going at this from two directions.
Exists, but merely seeks to replicate it and keep things as they are. In assuming that it has established a natural history, it looks at the end product of a development and seeks to maintain it on the pretense of fighting idealism. Assumptions like this are not tested, they are just assumed. This is the essence of vulgar materialism, and CPGB-ML is full of it. To quote the speaker of the article, it's quite clear who the writer of this is, by the way. Most probably it's Ranjit Brar, and if his likeness and name sound familiar, it's because he's the son of CPGB-ML founder Harpal Brar, and he's also the brother to current CPGB co-chair Josie Brar. Lots of bras. Are sex and gender synonyms?
I always forget that Jyoti Brar is his daughter. I get things muddled up. I do. I thought Josie was his wife or something. I'm not very good because there's the whole family is just like integrated into the party. It's a fucking crazy little shit thing going on there.
Well, there are synonyms, Aunt Helga, but a certain group of academics in the 70s decided that they weren't synonyms, that they were going to use gender in their own way, that they were going to use...
It wasn't the 70s, you fucking moron. The trans struggle predates the fucking World War II. Yeah. The 70s.
Gender to mean a social construct of...
And it goes even further back than that, but I'm on about like the modern, moment and things. And I might even be wrong saying it starts just, in the 20s, 30s. It probably goes even further back than that. I'm not been burst on that knowledge. Please, anyone who knows more, let me know in the chat.
Behavior surrounding what was expected of the biological differentiation amongst human beings. But biological differentiation between male and female is a real thing. It doesn't just exist in humanity, it exists.
Guys dropping fucking bombs, man. I don't, like these truth bombs. I just can't deal with them, man. He's firing at it. It's a real thing.
In many species throughout the natural world. As is clear.
Throughout the natural world. What's the natural? Is it natural? Like, do I have to talk about how many species? Not only like they don't just change like what their role is generally. Like they physically change their actual gender. Like there's loads of animals out there that can do that in the natural world, and they do so naturally.
Here from the first half of this video, the Central Committee can't seem to wrap their heads around anything outside of the common sense views of sex and gender. Marxism is a way of thinking by which you can examine life. Just having read a load of books doesn't suddenly give you the green light to say whatever you want to say. People who espouse this sort of stuff, by the way, are, in a strange sense, sort of privileged. They can, with enough prodding, acknowledge the existence of LGBT people and their hardship, but they flatly refuse to do anything beyond that, and being fine with the current state of things and content with the promise of equality under socialism. But here lies the contradiction. If LGBT people aren't oppressed, then there's no need to be liberated by socialism. But if they are oppressed, then they are failing to do their duty in defending all people oppressed by capitalism. Not to mention that it's clear from looking at past socialist examples that this attitude is blinding, and
LGBT people are heavily targeted by sex trafficking groups.
nothing is necessarily guaranteed. New awakenings must be campaigned for, even in the here and now, and there's just no confidence spewing
Even in the here and now.
out of these guys'
Sorry.
lips. If you
I had
insist
to.
that all that matters is class, and also insist that you're totes not queerphobic, I ask you the same question I asked to anti-feminist YouTubers. Why the need for such chide remarks? Why not just treat them like any other person? Why do you have to
If I said-
slip into
oh
this
my
subtle
God.
chauvinism all the time? Like you got some pathological intent towards doing
It's not. Is this something one of them actually said? It's very useful not to trust Muslims or not to trust Pakistanis or not to trust Afro-Americans. Quote, I don't really like that. Well, people rub you on along with each other. They get over that, don't they? What the fuck? Can anyone understand what the fuck is going on with this quote? Who the fuck? What? Also, it wouldn't be. It's not Afghanistani or Pakistani. It's Afghani, Paki. Like, lesson for people. The word Paki is not a slur. The reason it has bad context is because English people have used it like a slur. You would not call them a Pakistani because Stan means state. Paki means pure. So you would call them Paki, not Pakistani. Just like you would call it Afghani instead of Afghanistani, you know, like that's how that works. Like it's not a slur to say Paki. It's just white people have made it a slur because they've decided to use it in a racist fashion. That's where the problem of it comes from. Like it's all about the context of which the term is used. I mean, to be honest, now you probably couldn't even use it in the correct context and get away with it with a lot of people because of how bad it has been used as a slur. But nonetheless, it's not actually a. The word itself is just the fucking word. It just means pure. In isn't I can't remember if it's Pushtan or what language they sourced it from. I think it's Pushtan. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure there's linguists who watch these videos that can correct me.
So, it's clear that the Central Committee do not view them as the same, exemplified in their contrasting of LGBT people to ordinary people. Until the works of groups like LGSM during the 80s, most of the British Old Left, be they in parties or unions, tended to hold quite conservative views on LGBT issues. Could you imagine the kind of excuses that CPGB-ML would be coming up with if they were around 30 years back? The only reason that CPGB does the absolute bare minimum they can possible is because they have no other choice in the 21st century. Like I said,
Look
privilege,
at that fucking
choice.
shit, man. This is some proper transphobic shit. And they're using it to target gay people too. The reactionary nightmare of gay rights. This is an actual screenshot of a tweet they did. Like, this isn't like some plaything. It's like, I remember when they tweeted this. This is an actual fucking tweet they did. Some next level transphobic shit. Well, these guys are supposed to be a communist party. They don't support the people. They don't care about the lower classes. They don't look at struggles. They don't fight for the oppressed. They go around making money off the newspapers and making money off the fees that they charge people to be in the party.
In the 21st century. Like I said, privileged. Point number 2. CPGB-ML are class reductionists.
Ass reductionists.
So back to that initial question. What is similar between Carl Benjamin and the CPGB-ML? They both appeal to a caricature of the working class. Carl likes to flaunt himself as a supporter of the working man, but only his particular kind of working man. 2 summers ago he
a guy who likes Oswald Mosley. Yeah, it's gonna go down well.
chastised me on the basis that I'm a lame-o who lives off my parents, despite him.
You might want to not try that in a place like Yorkshire where it won't fly. Like, you know, there's a reason that you know, Oswald Mosley's shit worked in Birmingham, but it didn't work all too well anywhere else.
Previously sticking up for the working class in a video prior.
You know,
I could have
Oswald Mosley's shit pushes best in the Midlands and the South, and when he took it down south from the Midlands, he got stomped on. Like, not just figuratively. He didn't just get figuratively pushed out in a democratic means. He marched into fucking I think it was London, and communists and anarchists stomped the fucking shit out of Oswald Mosley and his fucking British Union of fascists and shot them out of fucking London.
been straddled in debt. I could have been working
Unfortunately, they didn't get Oswald Mosley, so he went wrapping his mouth on for another like fucking 40, 50 years. Yeah.
minimum wage, and I was. But because I didn't fit his perception of what a working class person is, he rejects my perspective, as well as the perspectives of BME.
I mean, even if we go by the basis that you do come across like someone who is of a middle class background, fucking Danger Mouse, I'm gonna call you that because Bad Mouse, Danger Mouse, same difference. So Danger Mouse, but doesn't mean I'm gonna dismiss your perspective. I'm just gonna take it from a critical eye. That's the difference between looking at things from a dialectical materialist perspective. I just thought that'd be important to lay down, and then looking at it from the perspectives of people like Benji Boy, and the way that CPGB-ML come at things too, where they're not interfacing and engaging with things that might be incorrect because of certain positions or perspectives. It might have problems with it because of certain failures and issues. But without looking at it, analyzing it, breaking it down, coming to understand it because it's part of our history and we should learn from our history, they ignore it, they dissociate from it, and they don't think about it, and they cut out from the needs of the people. It's always going to be about the needs of the oppressed people. There's good reason why Lenin and Stalin both decreed that anti-Semites get shot, and why Jewish people got extra rights in the Soviet Union because of the oppression that they had faced. Same with Georgian people, same with Cossack people. And a lot of other groups, because I'd be here all day if I'm listing all the different groups of the Soviet Union that had to get special rights because of the minority status. People don't understand why Russia was called the fucking prison of nations back in the day, and why people refer it as the prison of nations again today. People don't get that. But then when you ever hear a Russian, even a casual Russian who might not speak too much about it, even they, if they're a communist, even if they're not even the most, uh, you know, active of communists as they might have been in their youth, they can cut no fucking light for Putin and Putin's Russia and the war and all the other shit that's going down. Like, um, anyone that when you see these Moppinites and all that throwing all this respect for the Kaiserism of Putin and all this stuff like that, it's in complete disrespect of the Russian people who are against this shit, the communists of Russia who are against this shit, the working class people of Russia who suffer the consequences because of this shit. They're the people who suffer the most. Middle class people are always going to be able to find a way to deal with it for the most part, other than the ones who will fall down. But remember what Lenin said. I always forget how to say it properly, so I say remember what he said, but I'm terrible at saying this one. Um, the exception does not outweigh the norm. So it's the norm that the aristocracy is capable to stabilize. It is an exception that they be fallen in class to the proletariat, or fallen even further in class into the dissociated sector of society, either lumpen aristocrat, lumpen proletariat, depending on how much they fall into that sector of society. Um, the proletariat, however, they're fucked. Like, with the way capitalism works, when you start getting cut off from other nations, that is where a lot of your work comes from. That's when it's like, okay, well, we're not getting a lot of money coming in, we're not getting a lot of jobs coming in, we've been cut off from some of our resources. So the company's decision, and the next thing is to lay off a lot of workers, or at least cut people's hours. And then a lot of people lose their jobs. Russia has to start weighing in on its expansion abroad and investment in foreign production, which means that they start to export a lot of these industries that are failing to these countries. So these people lose their jobs anyway. And this becomes the cycle of, capitalist development. As Marx said, history repeats itself, and we've had the farce for the last 20 years of the U.S. fucking about. We're gonna get the tragedy now. We're in the Great Depression, 2.0, started in October 2019, and everyone seems to just have forgotten about it. It's gone off everyone's minds. That's affecting the working class across the world. You're gonna see prices hike, and you're gonna see wars emerge that make the last 20 years of constant war look like nothing, because these empires are now going to be screeching and scrawling. There's going to be anti imperialist action rising across the world. People fighting to have the control over their own land. Decolonization efforts. Capitalism is going to really bollock itself hard this decade. I fucking assure you that. And these dickheads, both Benji Boy and the cunty party of gonorrhea Britain, Mumpus Lumpus, they those bastards, their disregard for the proletariat and the proletariat struggle, the actual proletariat and the proletariat struggle, not their idealization of the proletariat that typically ends up creating a conception that fits more to the middle class man than it does the working man. The real working class and the lumpen proletariat, this shit, those two, the proper proletariat and the proper lumpen proletariat, is the real working class. Disenfranchised workers and the lowest class, the lowest of the franchise workers. They got solidarity between them in the way in which they go through struggles. What's it? But these guys disregard for it when we're hitting the biggest crisis of capital that's ever existed, the biggest economic crash to ever exist, and not because of coronavirus. Coronavirus did not cause this. This was coming anyway. They've been predicting it for fucking years. Capitalism has 5 to 8 years of okayish development, and then it crashes like a fucking a duck on fire. I don't know. Oh no, I just tuned in and I see a pic of Sargon. Don't worry, he's not the topic. But he's relative to the topic. Um I mean, like, so with the disregard during this biggest crisis of capital and humanity for the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat, this is more talking to the what's it, the crunchy penis, gonorrhea, Britain, Marxist Leninist Party, uh, the actual name, I promise. That's what CPGB-ML stands for. Cunty Party, Gonorrhea Britain. Crunchy penis. I should have said crusty. Yeah, the crusty penis of Gonorrhea Britain. Party. They should adopt that name. Maybe they'll get maybe they can complete their Grebo perspective of reality. But no, so their disregard for it really shows their disregard for any formulation of radical struggle for the people. Like there's, you know, when we've got all forms of different people, from Marxists to anarchists to other socialists, making fucking soup kitchens and food banks, and they ain't got loads of people paying them. All their party members are paying subscription fees to be in the party, and then they're all paying for newspapers to, fucking making a killing. They're not turning around and going, okay, well, how do we put this money back into the community? Not, they're just thinking like, okay, well, we gotta all take our piece of the profits and pocket that in. And it's like, well, this isn't. They've all got jobs, mind you. They're all working like really really high paying middle class jobs. The leadership, and so they don't need the excess money that's going to come from that, because I don't know where else it's going. What, to print off pictures of Stalin that they use the same one every time they go out with? So it's like, okay, it's not that. It's not the banners and ribbon stuff they use, because they just use that. I mean, and is that really that expensive? Like, you gotta be suspicious with these groups, man. Like, why are they harvesting coin and not using it for the people? Why are they disregarding struggles of the lower class just because they're too old to wrap their head around it? Like, this trans shit is just fucking ridiculous. And as I stated before, these people are vulgar materialists. They're using Hegelian thought in the way they're operating dialectics, and they're speaking. Pardon me. They're speaking from a perspective that is uh, what's the word? Driven by a rationalistic sense of philosophy. It's just the slime hole. I'm being messaged by the slime. So a comrade of mine said that a lot of nominal communist parties in Europe at this point are the parties of pensioners and union labor aristocrats, not the lumpen or proletariat. Yeah, they're all social democrat parties really at this point. Like, that's a um I mean, they're already sort of stating that anyway by the way that it's coming to nominal communist parties. Like, it's not just nominal in the sense that the ones that you could easily point out. They're nominal in the sense that they're um, what would be the word? Fuck. What would it be? Um, they're stereotypical. That's sort of the thing that really comes into them. They're nominal. Like, a lot of these communist parties are really nominal in the sense that they just follow a stereotype of Marxism Leninism in a very Khrushchevite fashion. And it's interesting that, like, so CPGB-ML, they blast Khrushchev all day long, but then they really like China. You see the contradiction there, because like, I mean, it's like something I'd add to something you said the other day, where you were defining like the era we've been in for the last, what is it, 30 years, which is unrelenting um, American dominance. I would argue that, like, the Cold War post 60s, it's sort of like, you've got this split world. You've got the British trying to hold on to their empire, doing the horrible shit they're doing. You've got the US going about trying to be the big empire, but then you've got the Soviet Union being the challenge to the big empire, like, as an empire, and they're throwing their weight around, and they're abusing other countries, and they're, you know, planting seeds that wreck revolutions just so that they could push their interests, supporting the Ethiopians in genocide against Etiennes and other people like that. So, I mean, it's like massive problems. Excuse my ignorance of UK electoral politics, but wasn't Sargon a member of UKIP? He was indeed. And am I curious how they had this flash in the pan swell and collapse, and why, not to get you off topic. So UKIP, Nigel Farage was sort of the only thing really holding UKIP together. Everyone else in UKIP is just blind, openly racist. Well, if Nigel Farage is, while openly racist, he's openly racist in a way where he somehow gets away with it. I don't know, but Farage is a little smarter than his compadres when it comes to presenting himself. When he left, the party didn't really have much heel to stand on. I think it's as well because the rest of them don't manage to get the, like, um, guy you could sit and have a drink in with a bar look on that Farage puts on, because he does succeed with that. That's where he does catch people a bit. He also managed to make us some great memes because of that. Like, I remember I've seen some, like animated things that have been pretty funny about that, where he's smoking, having a drink in the bar. Um, Fun things come from terrible situations, but no, UKIP shat itself after Farage has sort of had his freedom dance when we left the EU. I don't think he actually did a dance, but he might have. You don't know. Um, And there's no problem with being ignorant to UK politics. It's a dreary fucking situation. Especially now we haven't got the fun speaker at the house to listen to what the fuck they're all squabbling about, Nothing's better than, like, when they start causing shit and you're in order. But in, like, that fucking the way that Barkley geezer does it, where he's fucking going off at it, like, makes Promises questions at least a little more funny, because they all act like fucking kids. Yeah, Sargon was a part of UKIP. So was that Dracula guy who got done for making his dog like Hitler.
People and many other minorities. He will pay lip service to people on zero-hour contracts, but only when it's used to fight against leftists. Similarly then, CPGB-ML also fetishize an outdated caricature of the working class as if that were ever what it was to begin with. Exemplified in this horrendous PSA for its members, where they literally tell them effectively how to dress and act working class. Including all the boys have to get
the impoverished of Glasgow used to look good. Like they're turning around and being caricaturish, not just of people in struggle, but they're doing so of the Celts, common British practice. Self maintenance is not bourgeois. Working class folk fought hard to secure the means to a dignified presence. Long hair looks sloppy and grows on men. Okay, so if you go back and look through history, what did men have a lot of during the 1800s and the 1900s? And if you go back through history even further than that, long hair. Actually, it's very common in the lower class for people to be like that. Um, so here's a thing. Does anyone know why heavy metal is called heavy metal? Little thing, because I do. Um, I'll give you a hint. The bands did not come up with the name. It was actually an insult that was thrown at them. They didn't want to be called heavy metal when it came about. I mean, Black Sabbath started off as a heavy blues band. They weren't the first heavy blues band either. Um, Heavy metal was an insult thrown at them because they were steel workers and the fans of the music were steel workers. It was a derogatory way of saying that they're just banging around with heavy metal things and they're just making a lot of noise. Head banging was a thing of sort of like, phones of the music is the way in which it will throw people about. As soon as it came about, it was treated as this horrible thing, and they were slandered for being steel workers in the process of it. The same way that the punk movement was slandered for a lot of people who came into it for being, literal lumpen proletarians, um, people who have been disenfranchised from their work, or people who are um, homeless or lost their life and disabled in mass ways and other things like that that came into it. And punk people were massively slandered for coming from the lowest class and rising up and having something to say. Actually, in the point where the society was acting absolutely terrified of them. I never made my tea earlier. I meant to make a tea before I start this, and I just noticed my cup's just sat on the side, and I've not made it. I'm gonna go make my fucking tea. You guys can sit and wait. Ay, ay, ay. Or not go and paint it fucking red. Make the bourgeois dig. Paint it fucking red. Standing on fucking Master of Puppets. Fucking who is discarding? Yeah. Lumpen-Maoist. Oh, scheiße.
Undercut. But Harple, what about Vicky? Sadly for the party, reducing themselves to this purely class politics outlook is neither true nor pragmatic. You will only ever achieve a certain amount of support, and indeed a certain demographic, on the basis of class politics alone. Why? Well, if you want a simple reason, because it's boring. In order for people to find their liberation, they must first find actualization, fulfillment, and connection of their struggles into the
Gina. Yeah, communist in name only. Yeah. UK Parliament is more entertaining to watch than the US. They still suck, but the yelling and shouting and booing you don't find in the US. Yeah, we actually have an opposition government. Beautiful to watch. Can't imagine the US president having to give a State of the Union and having any pushback. having to have someone whack a hammer and tell the people to calm down and wait to give their pushback as well. Like people just yelling and shouting when they're not supposed to. The worst the US got was fucking what's her name? The crack hag, fucking when she ripped up Trump's declaration speech. Didn't stop him from doing it, but ripped it up. Pushback. Tony Iommi of Sabbath famously lost the tips of his fingers in the factory, played with special metal fingertip prosthetics. Yeah, and then like 30 years later, he turned around and was like, you know what? Probably would have been easier if I just learned to play the guitar the other way around. So Strong was a factory worker and he suffers with epilepsy. They've all been for all I know. Yeah, they were. They were all in the what's it, the Birmingham Steelworks. They're from the Sabbath's from the city of Birmingham. Actually, relatives of my granddad lived pretty close to relatives of his granddad, and they're both from a similar age bracket, so they likely knew each other as well. I can't ask my granddad because he's dead. Uh, which one? I'd say that Jimi Hendrix invented heavy metal first, though. I can agree with that assumption. Like, um, it's sort of like how the way that punk was sort of emerged came from like weirdly out of all places what the Kinks started. So like when Hendrix sounds far fetched, it doesn't sound too far fetched because it's quite like how the Kinks really kicked off punk. Weirdly enough, and the Kinks massively inspired pretty much everyone. I prefer the Kinks over the Beatles.
Revolutionary movement. Despite funding their books with Mao's Little Red Book, the Black Panther Party knew that it would take their position as an oppressed nation in America to organize effectively and to help other people understand their place in the system. By comparison then, Bob Avakian goes around larping to crowds as the next Lenin, talking about situations that nobody cares about and he gets booed at. Oddly enough, such an understanding has been staring at us in the face for hundreds of years. CPGB's insignia, like most others, is that of the hammer, for industrial workers, and the sickle, for agricultural peasantry, and maybe one more if you're Korean. Would it make sense to apply the same rhetoric that you do for workers as you would do for the peasantry, and vice versa? Lenin didn't. Remember that Brother Ho was but a mere Viet nationalist in 1919, but because of the Third International's theory on the right of self-determination, he found a shared necessity. Declarations don't convince people. Demonstrations do. CPGB-ML's insistence on this rugged worker stereotype invites the
People respond to action in society. The Panthers turned around. They were like, okay, we go around telling people we're gonna be the savior. We ain't gonna be no savior. All you gotta be is you gotta go do things. You gotta do things to the people with action and engagement. You show the people that you are for their struggle and for their means forward, and that brings light to the struggle, and that shows that gives more people in, and then you can do more for the people. You can show more for the people, and the struggle builds up that way. It's not just this case of telling people what's what, and they're gonna just follow you. That's not how it works.
opinion that supporting LGBT issues would alienate the working class, but sees absolutely no problematic of upholding the image of Joseph Stalin to the British public. That's fine. Just don't talk about those people. More to the point here, is this resistance or a costume party? Either way, I think CBGB.
I got a link from somewhere. It's still unlisted. Oh, you can't see it because the Yemenis flag's in the way, but it's still an unlisted video. I think that's what he did with all of them. I think they're all just unlisted.
finds itself in contradiction again here, trying to challenge the misconceptions on the one hand, whilst upholding some of the most reactionary narratives on the other. Even going as far as to be naively receptive to fascist dog whistles and having a general red-brown alliance kind of undertone amongst their entire party. Oh, unfortunately I can't see this tweet, but this person, from what I remember, said something of the following. Their caricature ultimately sows the seeds for their own regression and downfall to begin with. By appealing to these metaphysical assumptions, they reject the grassroots practice needed to succeed, instead assuming that in time the working class will come to them as a gift.
Think about the statement, it's okay to be white. That shows that they're... I don't think they don't understand what whiteness is. I think they're choosing to obfuscate it. Whiteness is not of cultural importance to us. It was something that was created by the British in the 1500s as a way to distinct white servants and slaves from black slaves. Fucking hairs going up my nose and tickling it.
Point number 3. CPGB-ML's rejection of the intersection. Indeed, imperialism and colonialism has its own intersection with LGBT politics. When European nations grabbed huge portions of the earth, they imposed their own standards of beauty and behavior upon the populace. Historically, this included repression of native matriarchal social structures, sexual practice, and gender expressions. All deviations from standard Western norms are thereby not tolerated, and without question, this was a violent, compulsory, systemic cleansing of traditional beliefs and customs. But the CPGB-ML asserts the Western imperialist bourgeoisie has suddenly discovered and embraced gay and transgender rights, which only yesterday it had vigorously opposed. The advantage to the bourgeoisie of this new discovered enthusiasm for gay rights is that it can use them to castigate oppressed countries who stick to the traditional religious prejudices. Are these people silly? Have they not noticed the far greater legacy of imperialist nations castigating other nations that defy traditional heteronormativism? Blimey, that's a word.
Yeah, they're completely reversing history. The deterioration of rights for women in the West Asian region. I don't know too much about what we did and what cultures existed within the rest of Asia to really go into description of that, other than maybe talking about China. But the Chinese relationship between the British and the... it's a bit different. I'm talking more of the distinct colonial overhauls where they were pushing out society, and with a lot of native groups, women were mostly equal, and a lot of times even more powerful within the society, within these different tribes and the cultures. And the British took it as alarming, and then did everything they could to try and eradicate it. Going back to Pelosi, that's the name, Pelosi. Everyone knows that she's a fucking, like, here's the thing, a lot of bourgeois and petty bourgeois in America, I think it's more the petty bourgeois than anything, but regardless, they come from families that are long time crack smokers. It's not a big time secret, because here's what happened. Basically, when they colonized here, they tried growing cocaine and they couldn't grow it well. So they started getting imports in, but because the imports were not coming in with enough to last them, they made crack cocaine, and that's where crack cocaine comes from. They invented crack cocaine to make their coke last longer, and then it's sort of been something that they've got very heavily. Anyone who knows what happens when you're on that long periods of time and you're doing it during pregnancies, and then you're doing it where you bring the kid up. So basically, they've engineered their family to get addicted to that shit all the fucking time. There's just a long haul, and I'm pretty damn sure Pelosi's one of them. Just think about the way she behaves when she's going out and about, engaging. I mean, she's sometimes gurning so hard you can't even understand her speech. Rips up Trump's speech, but it is theatre. She's still endorsed all the major things at the end of the day. It's for sure. Well, it's the same thing with when the prime ministers come in. Sorry, the shadow, the leader of the Majesty's opposition. When he's going at the prime minister a lot of the time, it's for sure. And Boris Johnson sometimes would quote on it. He's like, why are you getting mad at me? You agreed with me with this the other day. What the fuck is going on?" Like, it's all for show. Boris Johnson recently, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, maybe a month ago, turned around and what's it? Accused the leader of the opposition of uh being the guy who allowed Jimmy Savile to go off free, which is false. He never touched the Jimmy Savile case in his time as I can't remember what they're called, but he worked on the Judiciary Committee as a representative of the monarchy's House of Law. I mean, everyone's a representative of the Queen in that retrospect. I don't know if people know. British people aren't citizens. We are subjects. Still, that's how the system works. We're subjects, not we're in a monarchy. We're subjects. There's no solid constitution that says that we're citizens. There's a half-baked constitution that the judiciary is literally told that they're allowed to pick how they look at the constitution and whether they even want to recognize it in the name of the crown. But yeah, no, he went and basically got the guy accused of being a fucking someone who saved a pedophile, which is not the real case. I don't like to defend the petty bourgeoisie, but there was a false arena.
That the Saudi Arabian leadership is spared our unholy gay bourgeois wrath has everything to do with co-opting with the West from its very inception as a ruling class, not to do with the enthusiasm for gay rights that the ruling class has apparently been propagating since Stonewall. This enthusiasm reactionary narratives speak of, by the way, doesn't exist. It's surface-level window dressing created by elevating the preconception that LGBT rights are bourgeois into a principle, and applying that to their analysis of capitalism. From what we've spoken about so far, this should come as a big warning sign that rejecting intersectionality from socialist discourse creates a visibly retrograde outlook. There is not just the working class. We are a diverse group whose members face different kinds of oppression. It's still nurtured in the capitalist web, but it is directed along the lines of identity, something that CPGB-ML dearly misses. Whilst it is true that identity politics has a degree of bourgeois ideology attached to it, they get absolutely no brownie points for pointing this out, because it's already been acknowledged a million times by socialist adherents. Seriously, do you think it's some sort of, big old slam dunk to point out the brocialists' gambit? The brocialist problem is that they take the polar opposite stance to the usual liberal itpoller. They miss that whilst the ideology might well be flawed, the reasons for its existence are very, very real.
Absolutely, that is one of the most important things to take from the situation. Is that, yeah, things are flawed, but the bourgeoisie are dominating. They take real issues to split people up on them, and they've done a very good job of splitting people up and rallying people against each other on the LGBT issue, and they keep it in a point of contention. So the quote Badmouse is highlighting is still particularly true. The U.S. State Department funded National Endowment for Democracy will fund groups for LGBT plus in Cuba, but not in the Gulf states. Yeah, it is a problem. But that's like imperialism as well, abusing the situation. It's sort of a complicated situation where the CPGB-ML is using the fact that imperialism will abuse these situations to ignore the fact that imperialism was the one that abused them for not abiding by our traditionalist norms anyway. So then we're now abusing them for being traditionally European about the way they organize society. Exactly, they will recognize the talks of rights and humanitarianism for regime change. Absolutely, absolutely. And it actually turns around and makes societies not want to even go anywhere near the trans issue and see it as an enemy, see it as Western degradation because the West is pushing all this ideology. I mean, think about it. What do you think third world people hear when they hear about trans stuff? Do you think they hear direct stuff from trans people, or do you think they hear the media that's dominated by cis petty bourgeois women that tell them how it is to be trans? It's all centered around trans women and around a specific over sexualized caricature of trans women. And then when it serves their interests, they will push tradition. Either way, they are opportunists. Absolutely, absolutely. Hit the nail right on the head with the hammer on that one.
Dismissing identity politics on the basis of bourgeois ideology is that capital can be seen this way too. Surely, through the correct digging, we would find that the constructions of the bourgeoisie need to be acknowledged and worked through, not discarded on the altar of progress. Every time a movement fails to acknowledge this, it fails the masses. And it dooms CBGB's entire framework. They cannot simply say, black and white, unite and fight. They must first engage with their unique struggles directly. If you want a more fair critique of identity politics, I recommend reading the full transcript of this video or Hodder's article. I hope we've demonstrated that the real core problem with CPGB-ML is not that they march around with Stalin banners on May Day. I've been to the parade myself, and believe me, there's plenty of BME parties who do it. The problem with CPGB-ML is that in their attempt to fight back against propaganda, it's resulted in them becoming exactly what they've hated. Blind dogmatists who refuse to adapt to the changing times of society and the changing times of research. Lewis Hodder once again says it best themselves. When members have left out of frustration at the lack of self-criticism displayed within the party, or for that matter even their own health, there has been a dismissive air that says, well, if you're not willing to help now, how useful will you be when things get more difficult?
They go straight back on the party, not just in criticism. If they're unwilling to do anything for the proletariat now, what are they going to be willing to do when things get tough?
Yet this same logic can be applied to the party as a whole. If they are unwilling to undergo self-criticism now, how likely will they, when the party grows, should it become a force in British politics? Will it become increasingly vulgar and attack its own party members even when they are abiding by democratic centralism? Will it continue to ignore theory in order to position itself as the only Marxist-Leninist party in Britain? CPGB showcased that they are either A, ignorant of the facts and unwilling to do the research, or B, hold resentment to queer people, many of whom are working class, specifically by modes of capitalist oppression. I don't care. Both of these answers render CPGB-ML unable to represent the masses, and thus unfit to call themselves the party of the proletariat. If there is any hope for CPGB-ML to recover from this in any way, its only option in my mind would be to, ironically, have a cultural revolution of sorts. Open the doors of the Central Committee to let the masses in and eventually wither away the old elements of the party. Oh, a man can dream. It is our duty to stand with all oppressed parties, to vigorously defend their struggles and to bring their plight to the forefront of action we take. This is the only way that we can build the trust needed for the formation of a revolutionary mass and finally bring about the overthrow of the system that exploits us all, not fall into dogma. When we say that Marxism is correct, it is certainly not because Marx was a prophet, but because his theory has been proved correct in our practice and in our struggle.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for watching, guys, and do go and support the all-communist trans Soviet. Bye for now.
So it's really, really important to focus on the consolidation of that ending. These people are unfit. Not just on this trans issue as well. This goes further than this. This is a proper problem with the foundation of how they're looking at Marxism. The dogmatic, vulgar materialists dominated by the petty bourgeoisie. They have no place representing the proletariat at all. And no one should be looking at it from the perspective of quote Britain, end quote. If the Communist Party is in England, it should call itself the Communist Party of England. If it's in Scotland, it should call it the Communist Party of Scotland. They should not. It should never call itself the Communist Party of Britain. That's committing to colonial tradition. Oh yeah, it's just going on the paint on thing, but yeah, I'd really focus on the conclusion of that video because where it ends, it really slams it all in. Like what, especially what Lewis Hard was saying, but expand it forward. It's not just about self criticism. This is a party that's unwilling to do anything for the proletariat. Well, what is it gonna do when revolution comes? What's it gonna do for them then? What's it gonna do when it takes power? Unwilling to do anything now. What's it gonna do ever? Ever. It's claiming to be the only Marxist Leninist, the number one Marxist Leninist party in Britain. Bunch of arseholes. We do have to expand the discussion on this past not just the past just the issues of the problems of trans people, but it really comes in. The trans issue really shows them up for what they are. Their disrespect of the oppressed is phenomenal in the fact that it's so something that you just don't expect to come out of anyone. You don't expect anyone to be that unaware as a what would the word be? Can't English myself. Like that socially fucking unaware, you know. Okay. There we go. We cooled up the screen. Um, there we go. It just says unfuck her. It's supposed to say unfuck her birthday. It still looks a bit weird. But we'll stick with it. End of the day, what's it? I need to do more content surrounding it, but we need to stand firm with our trans comrades and show all solidarity and respect, and not just trans, LGBT in general. Our lesbian, gay, and trans comrades. Oh, and the bi comrades too. Everyone forgets about bisexual people. Or for funny's sake, the half gays. Sorry, I had to. But we have to show all the solidarity we can, and we have to stick by these people. But also think beyond just the trans issue on this. This party is unfit in all retrospect to have any place amongst the British people, the working people of England, Scotland, Cymru, Cornwall, and occupied Northern Ireland region. They got no place. They shouldn't be calling themselves Great Britain if they're a communist party. They were formed in England, so they're the Communist Party of England. That's what they should be calling themselves. But they want to continue the legacy of a party that was split between whether we should do Khrushchevism and Eurocommunism throughout the 60s and 70s, and eventually went Eurocommunist, and they're trying to bring back the Khrushchevism. But supporting China uh, criticizing Khrushchev as a way to cover for the fact that they literally support not just the same shit, but even more successful um, Trotskyism in China compared to the Trotskyism of Khrushchev. You gotta be very careful of parties like this because they're eloquent like that. They'll catch you off. It's like, oh yeah, well they're criticizing Khrushchev and they're criticizing Khrushchev quite well. And it's like you gotta think, okay, well, why do they understand how to make those criticisms quite well? It's because they follow the positions. They just follow them through China, so they know how to throw it down like they're going against it because it is something that they care to research and be knowledgeable about and stand up for in a different perspective and retrospective. You have arrived as is about to end. Um, so I give no heed to the CPGB-ML. What about the idea of being an ethnic national group versus that of a territory, i.e., Hungarian Communist Party versus Communist Party of Hungary, or whatever? Would such be an approach sense for US and UK? Yeah, I guess like the English Communist Party, the Irish Communist Party, the Cornish, the Communic, the Scottish. Like, I get what you're getting at. Like, rather than it being of the nation, it's the um the nation itself injected into the rhetoric. The ethnic national group is the forefront of what unites it together, because that could help deal with getting people to recognize decolonization. I mean, you get a lot of people in Northern England who wants to separate from the whole unions. I mean, there's even a Northern English Independence Party, so um, there's some prospects going forward. But yeah, no, I think that's actually not a bad idea. I've said this as well to Americans before. Um, and I've had this conversation with what's it? Uh, not just Comrade Net, but also Comrade Number Three. So the natives wouldn't be bothered if it was like they were tied to a state and they were like, they joined a communist party at that state and they were really tied to that state and where they get culturally from that state, because do you know what? There are natives who are like that too. Most Native Americans have been injected and poisoned and had their culture genocided and have had to engage with white culture. There's some parts of it that even they have respect to. They got no problem with someone being like, okay, I want to join the Communist Party of Tennessee or I want to join the Communist Party of Texas. Communist Party of America, however, that's when it gets problematic. Arbitrary lines that have been drawn between the lands that have been colonized. That's arbitrary to them. The Americans have done so many treaties, changed so many territories, fucked them about at every turn. The British did the same. It's all arbitrary lines at that point. The problem they've got is the settler supremacism, and what the natives come to see is that it it while it can exist, and a lot of the time really does exist with people who are still like, all about their state rather than all about America. But a lot of the time as well, these people that are more about the state they come from rather than the whole of America itself, and they drive from that position. A lot of the time end up being less about the colonialism of things, and are more inclined to be respectful towards native struggles and engage with that and learn from that and move forward from that. And they feel that there's more of a platform of decolonization that's possible when people are thinking more about breaking up America and looking at things from a state to state basis. So it's that's always not a bad idea, but also as well just the fact of like a lot of trailer trash do. You'll get people in America who will call themselves English communists. They'll call themselves Celtic communists. They'll call themselves Italian communists. They will not call themselves Americans. Um, so that's one thing to think about as well. So you could just use the same denigration that would come from the UK, where it's like, okay, so the English Communist Party would be able to conglomerate internationally with the other English communist parties that would exist around the world where there are English speaking peoples. So it helps actually on an international basis as well as a national basis. Like that idea is actually fucking really good. Um, yeah, I really fucking like that. Um, we need to get feet on the ground and start organizing and get ahead of these dickheads because um, things like the CPGB-ML and the RCG can't be allowed to keep clowning around and fucking up struggle. We ain't for that. So we need to buckle up and start getting things together and start getting show on the road. Um, I'm hoping to make a big move up to Yorkshire, but the plan is eventually is to organize with communists and get a food bank system going on and other things like that going in. But I got some things I need to massively sort out, and one of them is moving out of this fucking town. So there's prospects to look at for the future, but what's it? When I get to doing food bank project stuff and other things like that, it'll be documented as much as I possibly can. Get people seeing what's going down. Of people geolocating me as soon as they see a fucking landscape. Um, with the lovely attention I get from the Pat Socks, definitely. But the what's it? We need to get organized in as much as possible, so the least as many because they'll get the upper workers and the lower labor aristocracy, and we need to stop that. We need to stop them from disillusioning these people and get them on the right track, get them aligned with the lumpen and the proletariat. The lumpen proletariat and the proletariat. Uh, Lumpen is a more generalistic determination because of it. Well, not generalistic, with the right case. Spectral because obviously you've got the lumpen proletariat, lumpen aristocracy, lumpen bourgeoisie. You never just use the word lumpen alone to describe the lumpen proletariat. It's incorrect. I keep telling myself off for it, and I keep doing it. Keep telling other people off for it, and they keep doing it. It's a problem. We're all bad for it because everyone just says the lumpen because it's easy. All these words, all these French words and German words, and this word and that word. I'm not fucking. I'm not multilingual. Why did Marx have to be a bastard about it? I'm pressing play like I'm still doing the video, and I'm not even on the video. I'm on OBS. I'm just streamer mode. Fucking losing my mind. Probably barely hear it, but got the tunes on. Um, I had the repairman come down today, and I was just blasting Puerto Rican Puerto Rican rock and punk while he was fixing the things up. Pat Socks will pretend to talk fondly of Black Panthers and Fanon, but despise their actual ideology in regards to how we should approach the lumpen proletariat. Yeah, I mean, what's it? They'll try and tell you all this, all that, that they're not disregarding these people, but like, then they go and throw them down the sink as much as they possibly can. Live 378. Look at his commitment to the working class. Wait, if he's been doing them daily and he's now at like 2 weeks, he's basically now at 400. Like, he started picking this up around the time he was getting close to disregarding Jason. Like, interesting. The patterns of Caleb Moore. This is really old stuff. Sorry, I'm just looking. I'm thinking of some I might do. I'm not sure. Got fucking hair fucking going down my hair. Fucking long hair can be a bit of a nightmare at times. The E100. Entwicklung 100. What computer games get wrong about war? Everything. My suggested have been useless. I was looking to see if there might be something else I could do for a bit. Interesting how the only thing from Marx and Engels they uphold and are in the incorrect takes to the thinkers had that have since been corrected by later contributions. Yeah, and then they ignore the really good shit from these people. Like, what's it? Well, they don't even ignore. They do look into it because I've seen them eloquently speak about petty bourgeois socialism, neo feudalism, and they ascribe people as Kaiserists equatative to being petty bourgeois socialists or at the very least neo feudalists, and so they do this commandingly. So whenever you hear them call someone a utopian socialist, that is someone who is very class aware with the language they're using. So when they're calling Gentile a utopian socialist, you know something is fucking wrong with what they're saying, you know. Something's fucking wrong. But they know what they're saying. And they're referring to utopian socialism as in remark to petit bourgeois socialism. That's something that they ascribe themselves to as petty bourgeois or labor aristocratic individuals. Labor aristocracy's ideology and capitalism is wholly dictated by the petty bourgeoisie's interests in society, pressed through the cultural hegemonic institutions. The only other option the labor aristocracy has to distance itself from that is to center itself with the proletariat and the lumpen proletariat. And that's why it scares Caleb Mob and the lumpen proletariat and the proletariat, because they can bring proletarianized principles to labor aristocrats and get them away from that fucking horrible place. No, being in the labor aristocracy is all nice because they got all these benefits and they're living healthily by these like food on the plate and shelter, heating, and all the gadgets and bits that they can waste their fucking money on to save or end their life. You know what I'm saying? Like all the different computer gadgets, all the different this, all the different that. They all got the money for it. But you know what? Money don't buy happiness, and isolation, which is a big problem with the labor aristocracy, creates mass depression. A lot of aristocrats I see are looking to get in like kindled with and good relationships with proletarians, because being an aristocrat has them existing in a world where everyone is selfish, individualistic, and dickheadish towards them, and treats their communist positions in some of the most disrespectful of fashions. Like, it's not like you would if you're dealing with an anti-communist parent in the working class, where they'll literally just throw you out like my dad did when I became a communist. But they will belittle you and beshevel you and put you down. And I mean, that's why a lot of middle class people will also go the other way, where they turn into reactionaries and they become more fascistic over time as they're belittled and besheveled and pushed into the corner, especially if they start off as a Trotskyist like Caleb did. He keeps changing his story, but his original story was that the first thing he read was the revolution betrayed by Trotsky. Don't let him keep changing his story. Pressing play like I'm playing something. It's the mic drop, because I can't actually drop this thing. It's already been bashed around enough that it don't work properly, but I got the space bar, baby. But yeah, nah. I can't seem to think of anything to cover or do or continuate after this. I've done the video I needed to do. Oh wait, the Sue Gray report's been published.
ES Audio.
Yeah, Caleb fears the lumpen proletariat. That's why he gets all angry about it.
From the Evening Standard in London, I'm Mark Blunden, and this is The Leader. Sue Gray's report into Downing Street partying during COVID lockdowns has finally been published, and it's left the Prime Minister battling for political survival. We've already seen that fuzzy shot of Boris Johnson with a glass held aloft, and now there's more images featuring convivial drinks and food, one of which includes Chancellor Rishi Sunak. The top civil servant's report criticises what's described as an excessive drinking culture in Whitehall, which often broke lockdown rules at a time when the rest of Britain was under house arrest, as well as revealing shocking treatment of cleaning and security staff. Not long after publication, Mr Johnson made his way to the Commons for PMQs, where he repeated his apologies and said he took responsibility.
Empty bottles littering offices. Rooms so crowded, people were sitting on each other's laps, and security forced to intervene because the parties were so outrageous. At the centre was the Prime Minister orchestrating it.
Scottish National Party leader Ian Blackford also called for Mr Johnson to resign.
Well, people stayed at home to protect the NHS. The Prime Minister was engaging in drinking and debauchery that makes a mockery of the gut-wrenching sacrifices that each and every person made.
The Evening Standard's political reporter Rachel Burford has been covering developments as they happened on Wednesday and joins us now on the line from Westminster. Rachel, it's certainly been a whirlwind day around Whitehall. Could you give us an overview of Sue Gray's report?
Sue Gray finally released her full report today. It's 60 pages long. It sort of reinforces a lot of the things which had kind of leaked out before. I mean, some sections are pretty damning on the government. A lot of it had been reported before, but seeing it down in black and white as an official report is quite damning for the government. I think a lot of people will think. I think the key points are Sue Gray concluded that many will be totally dismayed by the behaviour that took place and the scale of it at the heart of government during those COVID lockdowns. Britain at the time was under pretty severe COVID laws and restrictions when some of these events took place. There is some really quite damning details about treatment of junior staff, of cleaners, particularly of security staff. I think some of those details really damaging to the government and to the senior staff who were in number 10 at the time.
And all this is going to be galling reading for many people, particularly those prevented from seeing sick relatives because of the COVID rules.
Some of these sort of events seem to have started off quite innocuously, quite sort of small events, and then turned into quite big, boozy parties in completely against COVID rules. And that will make a lot of people very angry, I think. One of the main points I took from the report was a Christmas party that happened on December the 18th, where there was an awards ceremony and a quiz, and people seemed to be having a very loud, huge party in number 10, attended by up to 45 people, the report says. And the next day, the cleaners came in on December the 19th and were cleaning red wine off the walls that had been spilt, been spilt on sort of boxes of copier paper. And that was the same day that the Prime Minister announced that London was going into Tier 4 restrictions and people were going to be banned from seeing their family at Christmas and mixing outside the household at Christmas. And that was the time that Christmas was sort of banned or cancelled by the Prime Minister. And that was because COVID was spreading so rapidly in the capital. People weren't allowed to leave Tier 4 areas at all. You weren't allowed to mix with households over Christmas. So you had to stay within your household on Christmas Day and throughout that whole Christmas period. And, just the sort of idea of these cleaners having to come in and, wipe wine off the walls and clean up after this big Christmas party that had gone on the night before those restrictions were announced is quite damning, I think, for the government.
Do you think there's anything to the argument that these were top civil servants running a pandemic-ravaged country, so they needed to chill out a bit?
Sue Gray in the report is quite clear that this was not across all of the civil service. Civil servants worked extremely hard and, staff in number 10 worked extremely hard throughout the COVID lockdown. But a lot of people were working very hard in a lot of different jobs across the country during the pandemic. I mean, you think about all the health staff and what they were doing. I don't think the sort of we were working hard, therefore we were allowed to kick back and have a wine time Fridays is an excuse that's going to wash with a lot of people.
So let's hear what Mr Johnson had to say at PMQs.
Some of these gatherings then went on far longer than was necessary. And they were clearly in breach of the rules and they fell foul of the rules. I had no knowledge of those subsequent proceedings because I simply wasn't there. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, I have been appalled by some of the behaviour, particularly in the treatment of the security and the cleaning staff. I'm happy to set on the record now that when I came to this House and said in all sincerity that the rules and guidance had been followed at all times, it was what I believed to be true. It was certainly the case when I was present at gatherings to wish staff farewell, and the House will note that my attendance at these moments, brief as it was, has not been found to be outside the rules. But clearly I would like to correct the record, to take this opportunity, not in any sense to absolve myself of responsibility, which I take and have always taken, but simply to explain why I spoke as I did in this House.
Rachel, how damaging is this going to be for the Prime Minister?
The thing that he's got on his side is that he was only fined once for his birthday party in June 2020, and he wasn't fined for any other parties, although there are obviously pictures of him making toasts in front of tables covered in booze, and there was obviously a sort of culture of parties and events being overlooked by people at the top in number 10 against COVID rules. So I think it'll all depend over the next couple of days. Obviously, at the same time as this report, you've got the cost of living crisis going on, the Northern Ireland Protocol, the war in Ukraine. So there's huge amounts going on in the country at the moment. And it may be that this, combined with the cost of living crisis, does start to make MPs think, well, is this the right man to be leading the country?
Let's go to the ads. Stay here to listen to more analysis on Sue Gray's report and an update on GM food. Why not hit rate and follow in the meantime? Welcome back. Rachel, what's this legal challenge to the Metropolitan Police about?
The Met are facing a legal challenge. So the Lib Dem here, Ryan Paddock, has teamed up with the Good Law Project to mount a legal challenge against the Met and their handling of the Partygate investigation. The Partygate probe ended last week with 126 fixed penalty notices, and I think after reading this report, some people may think that the Prime Minister should have been fined more than once, or there should have been more fines altogether. I think one of the sort of big things that came out from their investigation was the fact that it was junior staff. A lot of junior staff were fined, predominantly women as well, whereas senior members of number 10 staff got away with it.
So what's the Downing Street PR machine trying to get the attention away from Partygate?
There's a whole mixture of different things going on. So, you know, there's going to be cost of living measures announced in the very near future. The cost of living crisis is the thing that is really on people's minds at the moment. You know, energy bills going up so much, food going up, prices going up, how people are going to be surviving, especially those on lower wages. That is what is at the forefront of people's minds. So Chancellor Rishi Sunak is expected to announce some more measures to tackle that in the next few days. So that will sort of, I think, they're hoping to take the heat off this a bit. They're also pushing this Keir Starmer Beergate narrative as well.
I don't know what the fuck Beergate is, but that's the mess of British politics for you. I don't know who the fuck this news channel is. But yeah. I was hoping they'd have gone more into the Sue Gray report with that. I was hoping to read into it, but nada. Someone I might have to cover in another video, but good doing this with you, comrades. Have a good day, or good evening, or good morning, or whatever fucking time of day it is where you're at. That's it. Stay peachy, stay frosty, stay alert, and keep your heart and fucking soul out there for the people who struggle around the world, the people who are fighting against genocide, the people who are fighting against racial, sexual, genderial, everything in between, oppression. You know, all these oppressive people, all these oppressed groups out of the world. Keep your eye out for them. Keep your mind out for them. You know, think from an empathic perspective. Put yourself in the mind of everyone's shoes that you're coming at, and always, always, always apply dialectical and historical materialism universally. There is no room for rationalist thinking in the empirical the empirical philosophy. It's not science, it's philosophy. The empirical philosophy of dialectical materialism. Period. Red salute, comrades. Motherfuckers.